Hello and welcome to Fearless Authenticity with me, Jeanne Sparrow, where we find our biggest source of success in who we really are. These are conversations and maybe some meditations on what it takes and looks and feels like when we use our unique gifts to find our passions, make our dreams come true, and engage with the world in the way that we were created to truly serve. And I hope it gets deep because that's where we find the good stuff. You know, I love to say that. I like to mine for those little nuggets, but it's also about fun. Because don't get it twisted. If it ain't fun, it ain't worth doing. And as I always like to say, let's be brave, be free, be you together. Now, my guest today is a woman that her words struck a chord in me when we met. We were on a panel together earlier this year. And when I heard her whole story, it touched my heart. She is also the CEO of McCann Worldgroup China and has been in the C-suite of the biggest companies in the world, Starbucks China, InterContinental Hotels Group, Apple, and Procter Gamble. She has also spoken all over the world, 3 TEDx Talks, Fortune's Most Powerful Women Summit in Hong Kong, C2 in Montreal, and Hatch. She also took a year off of her amazing career to write a wonderful book called The Spare Room, the topic of her first TEDx Talk, and we're going to dive into that today. She sits on the board of SOS Children's Villages. She enjoys writing and teaching and is a proud wife, mother, and a dog mom too. I am honored to welcome Emily Chang to the Fearless Authenticity Podcast. Hey, Emily, it's good to see you again.
It's wonderful to see you. Thank you so much for having me.
I am so excited about this. So we met at the She-Suite Summit earlier this year, a gathering of amazing women doing amazing things. We were on a panel together and you said some awesome stuff, and especially about authenticity in leadership. And that's what made me sit up straight and listen the first go round. So I want to start with, before we get into the book, I want to know, when I say the words fearless authenticity to you, what are the first things that come to mind for you?
I could not relate more to the title of this podcast because I think it's exactly right. I think authenticity requires a degree of vulnerability and also of humility. And it's not easy to remain grounded in humility. So it does take a degree of fearlessness. And I think if we aren't fearless, we can't get to that stage of true, completely unmasked authenticity, the kind that helps people like you and I see each other and feel that flame and be like, yes, this is one of my people.
Yes. You know what? It's so funny you use that because a woman I used to work with, Melissa, she always used to say, it's that spark. Like cannot, it's lightning in a bottle and you cannot fake that. And I think so many of us end up trying to find that lightning in a bottle when it's already there. It's already in us. And that's how we find our people. And that's when things just flow for us. And so I remember when you were talking on the panel, I was like, I got to hear more about this book. And I hadn't read it yet. And now that I have read most of it and seen the TED Talk that started it, let's talk about that, because I think it gets to the heart of fearless authenticity in your personal and professional lives. So tell me what the concept of the spare room is and how you think it can be used in anyone's life, but even as exceptional as you are.
I think I'm not exceptional. That's the beauty of the whole story, which is I have come to believe through this book process. It was something I wanted to share, but ultimately, as usually happens, I learned a lot more than I thought I could give. And what I learned is really everybody is designed to be so exceptional, truly. And I hope that the Spare Room book helps people who haven't gotten to that stage yet unleash what it is they have to offer to the world. So the spare room serves as a euphemism. And I would hope that this is not just a book, but it becomes a movement similar to Pay It Forward. You know, I say that phrase and everybody knows what it means. Do you know who started it? Maybe not, because that's not the point. Yeah, I don't either. And I've even looked it up twice. The point is the movement becomes bigger than the person. And I don't want it to be about me. I would love for it to be about, hey, what's your spare room? And it becomes part of the way we communicate with one another, which is, what is it that you have to uniquely offer? Whether it is a resource like the spare room, time, money, your unique capabilities, your experiences, and then what's your offense or your opportunity, which is, what do you want to go direct that against? And then the intersection of those two things is what we're calling social legacy, right? Legacy being the thing that you leave better than you found it, and social defining the space in which you want to have that impact. So fundamentally, I believe if you can identify and write down succinctly your social legacy, because there's deep power in words, it helps you not only live with more intentionality every day, but as leaders in the workplace, it helps us become more authentic, more relatable, more human in the way that we engage with our people.
There's so much to unpack here. So I want to start with the fact that you actually have a spare room that you freely give, and you've been doing it since you were 19 or 20 years old. And people find their way into your spare room. And the fact that it's this literal space excites me so much. And so, like in the book, you take us through all the people who you've invited into your spare room, from a young woman who had run away from home and ended up on the streets with nothing at 14. And you were in college and you had this room and space for her, and she became your roommate. To little boys who have hydrocephalus, who had bad operations, and you helped to nurse them back into a healthy, happy life the way they are. And the fact that all of these things found you. The question I have when I read these stories and when I listen to them is, do you think that they found you because you already had the spare room, or did the spare room help you find them?
I think the answer is yes to both. There's something that's really difficult to explain, right? One of the questions I often get is, how did you get 17 in different places everywhere you've lived? The likelihood is really low. Are you looking for them? And we've never openly said, who should we house next? Our lives have always been full. And I think it's been one of those magnetic flow situations in life where we're open and somehow the need will find us. And as we say yes, the yes becomes more yes. And then in our lives, every time we've opened the spare room, we have been blessed and enriched with so much abundance of seeing just medical miracles and seeing sort of crushed spirits come back to life, having the opportunity to pour into people and see how they might transform or kind of come out of a cocoon. These have been incredibly enriching experiences for me and my family over the course of the last 2 decades. And then I think at the same time, perhaps because we are open and because it has created such abundance in our lives, these kids will find us as well. So we're finding them, they're finding us, and the room has been empty at times, but I think we probably went a good decade with no more than 1 month between one kid to the other.
And the thing I find so magical about it is that it seems to be a shared spare room between yourself, your husband, and your daughter, and your dog too. And how you guys support each other when you kind of get a little bit, I don't want to call it weaker, but when you're resolved to keep that spare room going. Because the story of Teo stands out in my head, because your daughter took the lead on that, was like, wait, mommy, hold up. And isn't it funny how your children repeat back to you your lessons?
Absolutely. She was 4 at the time, and she heard us saying, we don't feel equipped to take a little boy who's dying and screaming in unendurable pain, and she came around the corner and said, she had this tiny little finger out. She said, what you talking about? What do you mean you're going to leave him there? Let's go get him right now. I'll never forget that moment. That's exactly what she said. And I thought, Yeah, we should. As long as you're clear, he's going to be screaming all the time. And she, credit to very young little people. She was clear. She'd never complained when he kept us all up all night for the first couple weeks, maybe a couple months. She was incredibly generous, sharing her space, her family, her parents. She would find little ways to just give what she could to him. I remember she would come out with this little plastic box that she had bought with her own money, and she had written in her childish scrawl, Teo's comb. And it had a little comb and a little water spray in it because his head was so big. He had all this hair, but it still didn't cover his big old head. So she would come in every morning when his head was all wonky and spray it down and comb his hair as a little 4-year-old. And so she just found ways to contribute. And once in a while, you could see he was sort of irritating her. And she would say, this was a family decision. And she would just move on.
There's so many rich things that come when we give of ourselves, but you have to kind of know that you have that gift. When did you realize what your gift was? Is that something you always knew? Because you were young when you met the young lady, Leah.
Yes.
You were in college, driving home, and she was like basically in the gutter. Like had just escaped a really dangerous situation, and you were at a light and you asked her how she was doing. Did you know in that moment, like, or did it come to you as those moments passed? I guess I'm not saying, right in that moment when you stopped, but how did it connect for you that you were supposed to do something about it, especially so young? Like when I think back to when I was 19, like I could barely pay my phone bill.
It was a long time coming, frankly. So I'm not a genius. I think, in fact, I'm a slow learner. The first time I simply couldn't drive by this girl who was sitting on a sleety, dirty curb. I didn't think too much about it. I just said, I can't leave her there. So I bought her dinner, let her shower and crash on my couch, and then just continued to let her stay with me. It wasn't deeply thoughtful. It wasn't even deeply philanthropic. It was just, it's not right to leave her out there, and she'd been beaten up. And then I think there are a couple of other cases of one kid after the other. It was probably years later before I suddenly reflected on, my gosh, this seems to really be a pattern. How is this happening? And maybe it was another almost decade later when I started feeling compelled to write this book in 2017. And I was at a dinner. Somebody asked me, hey, would you be willing to do a TEDx talk? This is a really interesting concept. That's really when I started to think more deeply about what is the idea that I want to share. It's not just open your spare room. There's a much deeper thought, which is more about the resources you have available. And then I just kept unpacking. It's not just about the resources. It's also about what you're uniquely called to. Because instead of each of us trying to convince the other, this is the cause, this is the thing that's worthy of your time and money, if everybody identifies the thing that draws their heart, that breaks their heart, that gives them energy when they invest in it, then if we all know that thing, we'll find like-minded individuals. And then when we come together as a tribe, that's when I believe there's a real amplifying effect.
I could not agree more. And you know what I also love about this is the intentionality behind it, because I've come to believe a couple of things are true, that we're put here to do something very particular, and that we find our way to it, or it finds its way to us, and we do it sometimes completely oblivious to how we're fulfilling the purpose. But at some point in time in our lives, we start to search for the reason why.
Yeah.
And that when we discover the why, then we start to do it on purpose. And so all these happy accidents have this push and this punch to them, this energy that does that amplification. And that's how I see it happening. And when you talk in your book, like you even start your book with this in the preface, when you say that being intentional in your personal purpose makes you better and a more effective leader in your professional life. And you even referenced it just a few minutes ago when you were talking about it. But I want to pull that apart, because I think so often people kind of bifurcate their lives into work and personal, and don't see how one serves the other, and like how it's like this organic, or it's an organism, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I just wrote down this phrase, happy accidents, because that's exactly what it is. I don't think anyone should look at this book or these experiences and say, I could never do that. Or how could I possibly find that in my life? You don't need to. Look backward. And that's why the book has all these reflective exercises, because I truly believe everybody has this thing. You might already have it and you don't know it, like I was in that situation. Or maybe you're headed down the path toward it, and this will help kind of accelerate, and you'll get to that point and recognize and then lead into it with more intentionality. It could be any sort of stage in that process, but that process is life. And it's so exciting to see people coming into, oh, I know my offer. I don't know what I want to aim it at. Or I know the thing I want to go address with the rest of my life, but I don't know what I bring to the table. And then when you see people start coming together and saying, I think I know what my social legacy is. How do I get started? It's just so exciting to be on this journey. So it is starting with happy accidents and then moving into something that is much more intentional. And I'll tell you a story about that point, which is the work and family life integration, because it was a gentleman, a friend named Will Travis, who was in my office. He was trying to sell me something. I was the chief commercial officer at IHG, and he was representing his agency. And I think I approached it as, I don't need another agency. So I was probably I might have thought of myself as professional, but maybe a little bitchy, maybe a little, standoffish. And at the end of the meeting, he's like, thank you for your time. And then he peeked around the corner of my office and he saw this wall. It was kind of an odd shaped office. So there was a little yoga reflective corner. And he saw all these photos of all these kids. And he said, can I just ask you who those kids are? We started talking. And then, we kind of related as humans, and we had dinner. Because then I kind of felt I really liked him, and he kind of saw the humanity in me. And that night he said, why do you keep those two separate? I'm just asking. And I kind of said, well, that really has nothing to do with work. And in retrospect, that moment changed me. It changed the way I approach work with fearless authenticity, of bringing my life and my vulnerability and my kids at home and everything that we do as a family into the workplace. And even in that moment, as sort of jarring as his statement was and his questions, I don't even think I realized it then. It took a while for it to sort of percolate. And now I look back with deep gratitude to Will and say, you are the one who asked that key question that allowed me to really think, why aren't I integrating them? I should. And now years later, reflect and say, I'm such a better person and hopefully a better leader because of it.
I would even venture to guess, because I really connect that intentionality and that connection to success in particular, because I think that it's all sort of this, oh gosh, it's almost like something that feeds itself, right? Like the fountain that recirculates the water, that when you do something good, it does come back to you, but you're not doing it to get something good. You're just doing it because that's what you're supposed to be doing. And that's when you get into like this flow of life. And whenever there's like a in the flow, I'm learning, I'm still in the process of it, to ignore that, because it's like, or ignore that direction, because if it's not in flow, then it's not for us, right?
Exactly. And I think when we integrate, I want to do away with this idea of work-life balance because work is a big part of life. So it kind of, structurally doesn't make sense, but balance is a near impossibility. So instead of trying to balance two things where all our attention and resources are invested in trying to maintain this balance, if we put it together and deal with more of this messy middle, the together might look different for everybody. But if we're able to integrate work and family, I think we live differently, we engage differently, and we lead differently.
So what are some of the things that happened once you started working on that intentionally at when it comes to your work and how you were leading your teams? What happened with your relationships with the people that report to you? What happened with the way you connected to them or saw them and their potential? Like, did it open doors for you in a different way than, and maybe doors for them as well?
Three-dimensionally. So above at the peer level and with the team that reports to me. Above, I had the privilege of working for an incredible man named Kenneth McPherson. I loved him. He hired me. We had a great relationship. When he met Teo, he changed absolutely everything. He quietly found HR and implemented a completely new policy for foreigners to adopt Chinese babies and for the company to support that financially. He called me in his office one day with HR sitting there, and I thought, what is this about? And he said, I just want you to read this paper. And he pushed it across the desk at me. And then as I read it, I mean, I'm not speechless very often. I was speechless. He wanted to offer me $5,000 and a whole new policy he and HR put together to support us adopting Teo. I saw the depth of his heart. I saw how much he really is willing to support his people and thinks about us and cares about us. He won lifelong loyalty in me as a subordinate, as a friend, as a coworker. With my peers, peers, there is always this idea that we're better together. Yet there's always a little friction between functional leaders. There's always potentially a little competition. When people can see you as a human, you take a lot of that friction away. You just kind of grease it because it's easy to say biologically you must be somebody's daughter. You might have a spouse. You might be a mother. I see the photos on your desk. But it's different if you meet Teo and I bring him into the office. It's a little bit different when you can see I'm tired or I'm stressed because I couldn't sleep because this little boy who I didn't give birth to but I care about like my own son is keeping me awake at night, and it's stressing me that he's still in pain. And then I'll tell you, it brings out the very best with your teams because they see you as a human. You're not just the boss. The boss as a label is so hard to overcome. It's a wall. And it's not that I'm not the boss, but I want to be more than that. I want to be a leader who's in front and breaking down barriers for you. I want to be at your side, rolling up my sleeves, helping when I need to. And I would love the privilege of being behind you and pushing you into the spotlight so you can be successful. You might be more accustomed to the leader in front, maybe less so the others. But when you can see more of the humanity and the three-dimensionality of who I am, you might be more willing to believe that I really have your back. And I started to see people embracing more of their own work-family integration. When I say choose your family in the big moments, it's easy for a boss to say it. When they see me making those choices, I think it gives them permission to do the same.
Right, because sometimes the words, because words are so powerful, but words can also be really damaging when actions don't back them up and when there's not consistency in that. And every parent knows that for sure. And the thing that sticks out to me about this is that the authenticity piece, because what we often do, and I think this may be more true for women than it is for men in the office, but I'm not 100% sure. But we will often, if we've had a hard day, we won't say it. We sometimes take pride in toughing it out and sticking it through and putting on that good face and that sort of thing. And that especially the way you're talking about it here, that actually further cements that wall into place for everybody, our peers, the people we report to, and the people who report to us. Have you found that to be true, that when the mask comes off, and or here's the better part of it, how hard is it to not put that mask on of perfection?
I think it is hard, perhaps more for women sometimes, because I think generally, look, no blame and no judgment, but humans, we recognize patterns. That's what we do. So there's this maybe generalization that if you're a female executive, you might be of the mama bear genre. You might be of the bohemian, crunchy granola genre, or you might be the stone cold bitch genre. I'm not sure there are a ton more genres that people will try to put us in. So I think I've probably been put in at least two of the three throughout the course of my career, but I don't think we are cookie cutter molds of people. When I'm willing to be vulnerable, if I'm willing to show people that I'm hurting or insecure or feeling like I'm failing, what does that put me in? Does it make me suddenly the weak woman who doesn't deserve her job genre? I think there's always the risk that you feel somebody might think that about you, particularly if there are more men around you at the table. But it's a choice I made a while ago to say, I'm going to be okay with my emotions. And I think that I'm going to show them to my teams. And I think it'll help them. It'll take down that wall, but it'll help them feel like they can be more real with me. There was a woman I was just speaking to last week, and she started to get teary and she was so apologetic, so embarrassed. And I'm like, why? Stop putting your energy on apologizing. Put your energy on what you're feeling and tell me what you're feeling, and tell me, most importantly, what I can do to help you. Because we all cry. And there's no reason we can't cry in front of each other. That allows us to relate on a different level. But I think we have to be the ones who are fearless and equally willing to be vulnerable, setting the stage, showing the example before others might feel free to do the same.
Right. Because it's one thing, it's hard enough to change ourselves, but changing culture is a whole different thing. And did you feel that way when you decided to take off time? I mean, a whole year is a lot, especially at such an important juncture in your career. It felt like, just looking at your bio, that you were on a great trajectory, and you were moving and doing these wonderful programs, executive ed at Harvard, the LEAP program with Insight, all these different things that you were doing. You were on this fast track, and you were like, nope, I got to write this book right now. Was there any moment of doubt about that? Or was the impetus to write that book so strong for you that you knew whatever came next was going to be right?
The latter. I think too often we say things like, when I retire, I'm going to ... or at some point I'm going to take a sabbatical, or one day. But, at that point I was 45. So when is one day? And you mentioned my story with Leah. That was in 1999, I think. So it's already been a couple decades, and these stories are starting to fade. And I do believe that we should pursue those deeply passionate yearnings. I think there's a reason for them, right? And if I cannot get this idea of the book out of my head, and I'd been trying to write it for a couple of years, carving out 4 hours every weekend. My family was incredibly generous. But for anybody who's pursued something like this or some big creative project, 4 hours a weekend is not enough. It takes an hour to get into it. It takes an hour to extract yourself from it. You only have 2 hours. You want to do some fact checking. Before you know it, your time's gone. You really need to do it or not do it. And I think that's something that is a little bit about my personality. If I'm doing something, I will do it to the very best of my ability. If I'm having fun, I will have fun to the best of my ability. If I'm in a job, I will do this job to the best of my ability. And I felt that way about this book. If this is something I want to try, I want to do it to the best of my ability. And I don't want to live with any regrets. So in the end of the book, we talk about action planning. And then how do you know if you've been successful? How do you know what a life well lived looks like? Well, we have this section talking about your epitaph. What do you want people to say about you when you're gone? I would love to look backwards and very, very simply, this isn't in the book, I would like to just say, I was able to die empty. I gave everything away. I poured my passion and my energy and my heart into everyone around me. I don't die with any money. I don't die with any regrets. I don't die with any reserved love or care or action or intentionality that I wish I should have poured out.
I need to sit with that for a second, because I think that's what the challenge of midlife is all about. I think that's what midlife crises are always about. Because we start to lose our elders, we start to realize that we are becoming the elders. And that's when you realize if and when you have done what you're supposed to be doing, and you take stock, and sometimes you fall short, and it's scary looking at that. I do want to go back and do the exercises, because I'm a story person, so I was just looking through all the stories. Yes. But I want to go back and do those exercises, because I feel like there are junctures in all of our lives, just like with your friend Will, where somebody asks a question or asks you to do something, and it hits home in a way that nothing else ever has. And putting it in terms of how you want to leave this planet puts it, as finally as you possibly can. And I think that our culture kind of gives us this idea that we always have time left. I don't know if you feel that way, but it sometimes makes us think, especially because you've been sitting with this story for a few decades before you wrote it. Did you feel like you always had that time in that thing, like, oh, I'm gonna do it, oh, I'm gonna do it, and did you think you were gonna wait till retirement to do it before you decided to take that year-long break? Or, did you struggle with that decision? I guess that's where I'm getting at, because so many of us do have a hard time saying, what happens if this doesn't work out?
Mm. That's a great question. If we focus on that question, I think we're shackling ourselves for the potential for growth. Because if we say, what if this doesn't work out? What if it doesn't strike the mark? What if it's not successful? What we've already done is narrowed in so much on what we're defining success to be. So something I learned, I love this phrase, just holding it loosely. This is something that calls to me. I have no idea if I can write well. I have no idea how the publishing world works, right? So I'm coming in as naive or as uninformed as possible, but I want to do this thing. So my only criteria was I'm going to give myself a year. Our family talked about it. We all agreed. My daughter had a chance to enjoy American school system for 1 year. My husband wasn't working. We had this amazing, precious time as a family. We said, let's do it for a year. Financially, we're okay. After that, surely there's going to be a job. Because back to the point, on my deathbed one day, I won't probably say, gosh, I could have gotten to CEO sooner, or I could have done another job. I probably would have said, gosh, I wish I'd written that book, or what would have happened if I had captured this idea? And I've designed everything about this book, like I said, to be more like a movement. I don't make any money. We've already said we're donating 100% of all retail sales to SOS Children's, which is a board I sit on. I want this to be in every possible way, not about me. I want it to be something that I leave, for the world as social legacy, hopefully a little better than I found it.
What have you been seeing when it comes to what other people are coming up with? Because you're just past the year anniversary. So congratulations on the first year of your book and the movement. What kind of things have you seen people do with their spare room and their discoveries of finding it?
I think it's really been life altering. And what's interesting is it's not just for those in the middle of our lives. I find a lot of young people very interested in this book, and that was a little surprising to me. I think young people are on such an accelerated curve than I was when I was in my 20s. They are so much more self-aware. They're more cognizant about the impact they're leaving on the world. And they're just off to a running start in so many ways. So they're interested in doing this now. They don't want to wait till they're 20 years into their career to reflect and say, what should the back half be? They're saying, before I even enter the game, how do I want to enter? What is my intentionality for how I want to live my life? What kind of career I want to build for myself? I find it incredibly inspiring and very humbling. I think also very young children. I get so many pictures sent to me of people who've bought the book and then they say, I saw my kid reading this. And they're pictures of young children sitting there reading these stories. And that's something that was unexpected for me as well, but so lovely because I think the stories are relatable. Some, I guess parents have to gauge whether it's age appropriate to understand deeply, what's happening in some of these children's lives. But the fact that they can relate and that they then close the book and say, Mom, what are we doing? I think that's incredible. Just like how Lainey inspired us to say yes to Teo, I see young children reading these stories and asking their parents, so what's our family going to do? That's so exciting.
It is. And you know what? I just had this conversation this morning with a man I was interviewing for another job I was doing. And he was talking about his sons and how he's so in awe of them and how they approach going to college, how they approach their work, how they approach being involved in communities. And he was just like, he said, I'm astounded that these are my kids. He was like, because I had no clue. But I think that means, and this is what I said to him this morning, I think that means we're doing something right when our children can do something better. And by our children, I mean the community's children. For those of us who don't have kids, those who have biological kids, or our aunties and things like that, all of us who influence other children's lives, we don't, we want them to be better than us. And it's amazing how they can lead us back. And that kind of, that goes back to what you were talking about with Lainey, even when she was 4 years old. But what I think is probably happening in these families as well. And you talk about this with a young woman, and I can't remember her name now because I didn't write it down. You talk about the reverse mentorship.
Yeah.
Can you explain that to me? Because I found it to be so fascinating, because now that we're on social, I'm like, what is this?
I'm learning all the time, not only from Kendall. So when I started the Spare Room, even though my career's in marketing and I look after some creative agencies, I wanted to keep this separate. So I invest my own dollars, and I've hired a team. And the agency it's such a great story. So it's called Lembus. And Tara, who runs this agency, is one of the women featured in the book. So she is the woman who was the voice for the voiceless. She was the first Asian Pacific Islander, she's Canadian, who was a lead performer at Cirque du Soleil. And when she heard this story that was happening in India, it was the Nirbhaya rape case, it touched her so deeply. She asked herself, what am I using my voice for? And has pivoted to use her voice to do more for the world and to leave things better than she's found them. And what an incredible pivot, because of something that she believes so deeply and feels so drawn to. And she was so generous to say, I love the impact story of the Spare Room. Can I help you with it? So they're the agency working with me now, which is phenomenal. And before I had started working with Tara, I thought I'd probably need an intern to help me get going with socials. And I did this sort of live post, interviewed a lot of folks. It was interesting, Jeannie, is I interviewed everyone from very senior VPs of marketing to very young high school students. And Kendall was just graduating and college and getting ready for her first job. And there was something about her. She was so self-possessed, so smart, so engaged, and so fearless. She just speaks to me like I'm a human, and I love that. She'll challenge me. She'll say, are you sure that's what you want to do? Or I understand your intent, but here's how it's going to land on social. Or let me show you some great examples of reels. This is what I think you should be doing. She's wonderful. And we've now worked together for over a year. She's taught me so much. She gives me a different point of view. She's challenging me. I do my best to try and give her advice. As she was doing her final internship interview, I was like, well, run your presentation by me. I'll tell you what I would think if I were on the panel. And we've just developed this amazing relationship. It's a friendship. And yet it's a mutual mentorship in every way, shape, and form. I'm so, so grateful for her.
Oh, and the thing is, I remember having this conversation with one of my mentees at one point when she was asking for some advice because she was looking for a new position and she was trying to network. And she was like, what should I be asking for? I said, honey, tell people what you can bring them, because she says, what can I do for them? I was like, the same stuff you've done for me, like this. And I think a lot of times because of that, the word mentor, it makes it feel like they're coming to us for expertise and not realizing the value of what they leave behind. And that's what I love about you purposely calling that a reverse mentorship, and how she gives and acknowledging how she gives so much in that relationship, because I think we've all experienced that with those of us who've had interns and mentor relationships. I now look back on my early mentorships when people were mentoring me and how grateful I was to them, and I was like, oh, I wonder what I brought to the table then, because I wasn't aware of it. And I think knowing our value is so important, and what we do with it after that. So I love that so much.
I think that's a great observation. She and I were just talking. We were mentioning earlier how the young people, our children collectively, are on this accelerated curve. Well, think about how we can further accelerate it. I was just talking to her last week, and I was saying, there's so many just dim-witted things I didn't understand when I was your age. I hope you can learn from all the things I missed. For instance, when somebody offers help, always say yes. If somebody offered me help, I think part being a Chinese girl, part being so uber respectful of authority. If somebody said, "Do you need help?" I also didn't want to look stupid. I'd be like, "Oh, I'm good." Or, "Oh, thank you so much. I'll keep it in mind." What an idiot. Somebody's offering to help because they see potential in you. So I told Kendall, every time somebody offers help, think of what you can ask them for. Think of how you can help them. Feel great that they were able to help you. What is a meaningful area in which this person excels and which you can learn from? Maybe you don't even know in the moment. You can say, "I would love to think about that. I'll come back to you." And then when you have a chance to go back to this person and thoughtfully consider how they might help. And these are all the different things. I just think she's so sharp. She's so ahead of the game already. And if she can learn from all the things I missed when I was in my 20s and she can just accelerate that, I mean, the future is just unstoppable.
Yeah. And that's how we empower the next generation to put a little more oomph behind what they already are feeling. And that's part of legacy as well. Wow, you're giving me so many things to think about, Emily. What do you think is one of the biggest challenges that you've had in life, or maybe perhaps even failures you faced? And do you have a way of bouncing back from them? It's something that you do when you're disappointed or discouraged, and you've helped so many young people, not only through your spare room, but also people like Kendall and this, reverse mentorship and things. What's the thing you tell them about failure and challenges and difficult times?
Oh, a couple of things come to mind. The biggest challenge physically was, I remember for my 40th birthday, my husband bought us a 24-hour survival course. Don't sleep for 24 hours. We hiked something like 46 kilometers. We had to filter our water. We had to catch, pluck, kill, cook wild mountain chicken. I mean, just the kind of the things you think, I can't do that. But just like the spare room, what's interesting is we didn't really know what we signed up for. So you just take one step at a time. You're like, yeah, sure, I can filter water. And then how do I hike through a slick bamboo forest up a mountainside while it's raining? Okay, well, we figured out how to lasso the thing and then pull ourselves up. Turns out I can do that too. I think these types of extreme challenges are awesome because they teach us to stretch the limits of what we can do. It also reminds me of how small I am in such a big world. So when I say, "Oh my gosh, I'm starving," I'm nowhere near starving. When I say I can't take another step, I can take so many more steps. I think intentionally building these challenges into our life. Somebody mentioned recently, you really like extreme sports. I really don't. I'm not one of those, thrill of adventure type of people, but I do find big challenges because what I think it does is, imagine we're inside a balloon. It allows me to stretch and see how far the edges of that skin can go. And I think that understanding that diameter gives us more opportunity and more bravery as we step into the future. The second question you asked was sort of, what do you do when you're disappointed or discouraged, or when you think you can't go another step? I've never been to Alcoholics Anonymous, but I do remember early on I saw the 12 steps, and then I saw what they call the Serenity Prayer. And I just love it. I think it's the best advice for work and when you're either challenged or feeling like you're failing, because it says, "God grant me the
serenity to accept." Wait, hold up. Wait, is it the? Oh, girl, listen, we're failing at this one. Hold up, but I know it. God grant me the serenity to accept the things
I cannot change.
that I cannot change.
Yes.
And there's another part to it.
The strength to change the things I can and the wisdom to know the difference. It's
yes, there we go. You're good. Wait, you know what? Let me look it up just to be sure, because I don't want the Alcoholics Anonymous people to the Serenity prayer. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Oh, this is really long. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as the pathway to peace, taking as he did this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that he will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next. Amen.
Oh, I only knew that very, very
Me
briefly.
too. I never knew there was a whole other part of it, but when I put in Serenity Prayer, that's what came up. But
Okay.
the wisdom to know the difference, that piece.
I
I'm
like that
sorry,
a
I
lot.
took us all in a chat on a on a tangent.
I learned something new. No, it's really, really good. I think that's the key. You know, if you're facing challenge or feeling like you're failing, the key question is, what can I change? Do I have the courage to go make that change? What can I not change? And how do I leave it behind? Because if I just posted something about this, reflecting versus ruminating. It's one thing to reflect on a past experience when I didn't do my best, when I wasn't at my best. It's good to scrutinize my behavior. What could I have done better? What could have led to a more desirable outcome? And then I move forward. The difference with ruminating is I think that can become toxic, because ruminating is I can't get myself out of that. I can't stop beating myself up. I can't stop thinking about this past failure, and it can really become debilitating. So I think going back to this simple, give me the serenity. Give me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, to accept where I screwed up, and to say, okay, I've learned from it. Let me move forward and leave it behind. And now I've shed that bit and I'm sharper and a little bit stronger and better as I move forward.
I love it, because that is the essence of sitting with something and then letting it go and being
Yes.
able to do it and being able to move. Because like one of the things I said to a friend recently was that, I don't even know that I want to be in any sort of emotional state anymore. And I'm not going for happiness, like, because happiness comes and goes, just like sadness comes and goes. But I want to move with grace and with ease through whatever happens, the good stuff, the bad stuff, and go, okay, what is it that I can take from this into the next thing? Because there's always going to be a next thing. And for the longest time, I didn't know that I always thought there was a destination. And I'm like, oh, there really isn't. It really is about this journey. Oh, I get it now. And I just, it amazes me the things that I learn. And I finally understand now what my dad used to say. He used to say, Jeanne, the older I get, the more I know what I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
How much I don't know as well. So I always like to close with a couple of questions. So these are moving into the home stretch. What are some of what is, you think, your proudest achievement, and what do you still dream of doing? I think you've kind of answered this already, but I want to hear it in the context of this succinctness.
My proudest achievement is my family. My daughter last night, so we do this thing every night. We call it HPG. We each talk about our high, our proud, and our gratitude. And it's good to talk about your high and your gratitude. The middle piece was something I feel like I learned as a child because I so wanted to earn my parents' love and pride. I wanted nothing more than for my mother to say, I'm proud of you. It's not how Chinese parents engage with their children. So I felt like I was seeking others' approval too much. And this was advice that Lee Radford, an old boss and a wonderful woman, gave me early on. She said, I want to teach my boys how to be proud of themselves, how to not be prideful, but to understand and feel comfortable saying, I'm proud of this. And in the beginning, when we did HPGs, it was really hard because it's very awkward with the way we've been raised to say, I'm proud of myself. It just feels weird, but it's really, really been a wonderful practice for our family. And I am deeply proud of our family. I'm proud that we are unified, that we love each other. We live in joy, peace, grace. To your point last night for Lainey's gratitude, that's exactly what she said. She said, we've been in lockdown now, that we're in this strange Shanghai lockdown right now. And she said, I'm just so grateful that we love each other and it's a fun time. And that's something that I don't think we can ever take for granted. So that for sure is my proudest achievement.
Oh my goodness. And what do you still dream of doing?
My dream would be for the Spare Room book to amplify, because when I see the impact it's having on people, when I saw that it actually was getting published, I was a little bit in awe. Like, okay, that's happening. And then when, has it been like a runaway massive thing? No, but is it building traction and engagement and starting to grow sort of organically? Yes. And most importantly, you'd asked me earlier, Jeannie, how are people reacting to it? And that's where I'm feeling such a sense of fulfillment in this little thing. And for it, if it could amplify and if it could have that same impact on a broader scale, I think that would be my dream.
Oh, I hope it does, because I think these are the things that make our world better, bit by bit, inch by inch, because it's not going to be like, I think we all want it to be like one day we wake up and all the bad things have resolved, and there's one big change, movement of change, and we wake up and it's better. But it's more like a dance, just like healing. It's like, you got to do the cha-cha. You take a couple steps back and take a couple steps forward. You shimmy your shoulders and shake off the rest. Oh my goodness. But it's these incremental changes that I think where we'll finally find our peace. So I hope the Spare Room, and I will do everything I can to implement it in my own life and amplify it as well. I have been so moved by what I've read. I can't wait to see how I feel when I'm done with the whole book. Because I'm about to enter into that process. I've been in the process of writing my own book for a while now too. So this will help, I think. I think this will help a lot. Now, let's get to my final question, which is, when do you feel like you are at your best, truest, most authentic expression of yourself?
Right now would be a really good example where I'm taking care of myself, not being self-indulgent, but investing in self-care. And therefore, I feel like I do have an ability to integrate my work and my family. I have the privilege of working for a company that supports the Spare Room. I work for somebody who shares my ethos. So I do feel I can bring my full self to work. And I know, again, that's something that not everybody feels. And I haven't always experienced in my career. So I'm very grateful for that. And then I have the chance to speak to somebody who's like a soul sister who has such a similar life philosophy and belief. This is the moment where I feel like 100% this is me.
Yeah, me too. Me too. It feels so good when you meet people who come at it from a different perspective, but still end up with the same essence of truth. And that is a gift. And I appreciate you so much for sharing your gift with my listeners and with me. I really do. Thank you. It was a joy meeting you. And I can't wait to see where both of our authentic journeys take us.
I agree. This is just the start of a friendship, and thank you so much for having me today.
So, Emily, oh my goodness, Emily, feeling like a sister to me. And the way that she thinks about authenticity in action and being of service to others, it helps me to fill in some blanks of some things that I've missed. So, here's just a couple of things I want to highlight from that conversation. There's a lot of layers, lots to unpack. But from her concept of the Spare Room, not just being about our resources and the things that we have, but what we are uniquely called to do, that when we all do that one thing that we have, that then we can experience an amplifying effect when we come together. And it's not about any sort of competition or glomming on to somebody else's thing. We have our things. The power of writing things down. I agree with this so much. And Paige Turner talked about this in a past episode. The deep power of words. And having been somebody who uses words all the time, I say this all the time. But one thing, because spoken word is so important to me, I forget about how seeing things written down has so much power and helps you to walk with the intention that go along with those words, because there's power and oomph and spirit in words that I guess seeing them, I missed that part. And I love that she wants to get away, do away rather, with the work-life balance concept, this idea that we're wasting our energy trying to separate all these things and trying to stay in this balance that doesn't really exist when we just kind of throw it all together and we live in the messy middle of it. And something that really, really hurt because it hits so close to home, reflecting versus ruminating. I have a big problem with this because I do want to sit with things and figure them out, but sometimes it goes beyond reflection and beyond just scrutinizing the behavior, figuring out what I could have done better, and then just moving on from it. And it becomes this thing that you just chew on and chew on and chew on and get stuck in it, and how debilitating that can be. And using, the concept of granting me the serenity to accept that I screwed up and say, okay, I learned from it and move on. That's the essence of letting go. And that's something I've been working on. And then the epitaph, like thinking about what you want to be said or what you want your life to say about you. And the fact that she wants to die empty, that she gave it all away, her passion, her energy, her heart, no money, no money, no regrets, no reserved love that she held back, no action, nothing that she wishes she would have poured out. How many of us can say that when, that at that moment, that if something were to happen to us tomorrow, that we didn't give all we could? Thank you, Emily, for giving me stuff to think about. All of us for things to think about. Because, I think I'm going to be marinating in that for a minute as I finish reading her book. So thank you again, Emily. Appreciate you so much. And thank you to you, my Fearless Authenticity crew. I appreciate your support, checking us out and listening to us all the time. Thank you to my Fearless Authenticity production team for making this podcast happen. I'd love it if you followed me on social media, like, rate, review, download, subscribe, share, take whatever positive action you feel inspired to do. Check it out on YouTube as well. And send us your comments, your questions, connect with us. We want to know what you're thinking about. This has been Fearless Authenticity with me, Jeanne Sparrow, and I'll see you soon.